Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on refugee migration and diaspora. This is our second lecture on the introduction to migration studies. So, in continuation from our previous lecture, I am going to continue with the different models of migration. And today we are going to first discuss E.S. Lee's theory of migration. E.S. Lee or Everett S. Lee in the year 1965 proposes his theory of migration, which explains migration patterns based on push and pull factors. These are two factors that greatly determine the migration flow. And what do they entail? They entail economic opportunities and social conditions both in the origin and the destination countries. So, push factors, let us see what push factors involve. Push factors involve not having enough jobs in our once native country, fewer opportunities, primitive conditions of living, desertification, famine or drought, political fear or persecution, slavery or forced labor, poor medical care, loss of wealth, natural disasters, lack of political or religious freedom, then increased pollution, poor standards of housing, landlord-tenant issues, bullying, discrimination, poor chances of marrying, and then in the worst case of civil war, right. All these factors actually forces a person, thrusts a person out of one's own national border. It forces person to either move away from one's native place of origin to another part of the country, or further leave one's country and move internationally. These are some of the negative factors that make an individual choose another part or another state within the nation, or a different nation state altogether. Then we have the pull factors, which include job opportunities, better living conditions, political as well as religious freedom, enjoyment, education, better medical facilities, attractive climate, security, family connections, industry, better chances of marrying. So, pull factors are some of the determinants that attract us to another country. It could be because of better education, it could be because of the basic regime being more flexible and more tolerant, allowing better political religious freedom, and the overall living conditions becoming, living standards going higher. So, there is a chance of upward mobility, an overall upward mobility. So, the conceptualization of push and pull factors have contributed significantly in the realm of migration studies. Push factors encourage people to leave their points of origin and settle elsewhere, whereas pull factors attract migrants to newer areas. For example, high unemployment is a common push factor, whereas an abundance of jobs is an effective pull factor. So, push factors in a nutshell are factors that force the people to move their base from one region to another, from their native region to another host country or host region. These are the negative factors associated with the current place or nation in which a person lives. And finally, some of the push factors are worsening of climate, too much of erosion, too much of landslide, which all of which and then flood, heavy downpour, where monsoons are sometimes very destructive, they destroy public property, and then unstable government and lack of job opportunities. All these negative factors actually determine a person's shift, moving of base from one region to another. Now, pull factors are the certain positive factors associated with a new place to which people are likely to move. Some of the crucial pull factors are better standards of living, educational facilities, and then better job opportunities. So, in a nutshell, as we can see in this chart, if we can quickly summarize, pull factors include access to services, better job opportunities, more entertainment facilities, better transport links. That is very important. If you are living in a remote area which is not connected to any trains, any flights, you will face hardship in commuting, because today's world is all about connectivity and communication. So better transport links becomes an important factor, improved living conditions, and hope for a better way of life, better lifestyle, and then family links, right? In due to a very strict regime, some parts of the world are very under strict governance, where it is even difficult to contact with one's family through telephonic exchange or even through an email, and people do not usually choose to stay in those parts of country. They are war-ridden spaces where there is a strict surveillance, there is a strict governance that prevents even family members to connect with each other through telephonic exchange or through email written connection. So on the other hand, we have the push factors, such as few services. If you don't have any job opportunity, and then an unhappy life overall, poor transport links, not well connected to the bigger cities, and then natural disaster prone area, if there is a lot of landslide and erosion, flood, and so on. And then if it is a war-ridden area, finally, if there is a shortage of natural produce, fresh produce or food in the area where you are living, all these actually amount to, or they add up to, the push factors. Next, we have something called the Harris-Todaro model. The Harris-Todaro model, named after John R. Harris and Michael Todaro, is an economic model used in development economics and welfare economics, and this model is used to explain some of the issues concerning urban-rural or rather rural-urban migration. The main assumption of this Harris-Todaro model is that the migration decision is based on expected income differentials between rural and urban areas rather than just wage differentials. So, why do people migrate from the rural areas to the urban areas? To put it very plainly, it's not always the actual income difference, the actual increase in income that happens when one moves to the urban area. It's the expectation factors plays a very important role. So, rather than the actual income differential or wage differential, it is the expected income differential, with the expectation that we have around our concept of metropolitan city, the opportunities booming in that metropolitan city, that also influences and in fact propels large scale migration. Just on the basis of expectation, a large scale of people, a large number of people can move from village to city. And this does not have got really to do with the actual wage. It's all mainly based on expectation. So, the expectation becomes the main factor here, right? So, rural-urban migration in a context of high urban unemployment can be economically rational if expected urban income exceeds expected rural income. So, there is also this role of certain imaging and imagination around the city life that we harbor back in the villages. So, the kind of city life that we expect, the kind of city life that we imagine and image, that becomes a pull factor. If we land up in a city, we are going to land up on a better job with a better income. It has not got anything to do with the exact scenario always, right? And it is thereby not driven by any rationality or logic that is economically explained or understood. It is mainly about one's imagination and expectation about the city life. So, Todero's model thus postulates that migration proceeds in response to urban rural differences in expected rather than actual earnings. So, Michael Todaro had prepared this model back in 1969, which says the following. A. Migration is stimulated primarily by rational economic consideration of relative benefits and costs, mostly financial but also psychological, right? So, there is an economic consideration of relative benefits and costs, and more than this is based on actual financial calculation or the real picture out there in the city. It is also, psychological in nature. It is also based on what we are expecting, what a rural individual expects from a city, in a city. Next, the decision to migrate depends on expected rather than actual rural real wage differentials. This is something we have already explained in our previous slide. Moving on, expected differential is determined by the interaction of two variables, the actual urban rural wage differential and the probability of successfully obtaining employment in the urban modern sector. So, there are two things that shape this expected differential. On the one hand, we have the actual urban rural wage differential, and on the other hand, we have the probability of successfully obtaining employment. Right? We have the data of the urban rural wage differential, which is for real, and on the other hand, the probability that if we land up in a city, in a metropolitan city, we are going to obtain a job, the conjecture or the hypothesis that is associated. These two variables interact to shape the expectation or the expected differential. Next, moving on, the probability of obtaining an urban job is inversely related to the urban unemployment rate. So, if urban unemployment rate is very high, people are not being employed there in the city, then my probability of obtaining a job there will be low. On the other hand, if the employability is very good, the unemployment rate is very less, then my probability increases of obtaining a job in the city, right? These two are inversely related factors. The last point being that migration in excess of urban job opportunity growth rates are not only possible but also rational and probable in the face of continued positive urban rural expected income differentials. So, when we have an expectation, certain expectation in terms of urban rural income differentials, it can cause migration in excess of job opportunity, regardless of any definite opportunity existing there in the city. Sometimes people from rural regions can actually migrate to the city just searching for job, and this is all based on an expectation. This is not driven by any rationality or probability, but this is mainly or majorly driven by an expectation. We do not see any possible or impending job for a section of people that have migrated to the city. This is also possible. This happens a lot, and in fact, this can be rationalized. This can be very much probable. People do not only come to city when they have a job in hand. They come with the expectation of job, right? So, from here we are going to delve into the question of who is a refugee. According to UNHCR, whose full form is United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her own country due to fear of persecution, war or violence. So, a refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution, for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. In all likelihood, they cannot return to their original home, or they are afraid to do so. War and ethnic as well as tribal and religious violence or conflicts are the leading causes of refugees fleeing to another country. Currently, there is this attention for climate refugees apart from the war or ethnic violence or religious violence factors. We also have a category of climate refugees, people who move because of drought, due to floods or other environmental disasters. The absolute number of people living outside of their country of birth had increased from 93 million in 1960 to 244 million in 2016, which is an exponential growth in the number of refugees, in the number of rootless people spread across the globe. Next, who is a migrant? The term migrant defines a person who moves away from his or her place of usual residence, whether within a country or across an international border, either temporarily or permanently, and they shift their base, they move their base due to a variety of reasons. The term migrant includes a number of well defined legal categories of people. They could be the migrant workers, persons whose particular types of movements are legally defined, such as the smuggled migrants or the illegal migrants, as well as those whose status or means of movement are not specifically defined under international law. Such people are the international students, right? They go temporarily for a degree and they usually come back to their country of origin. International migrants can intend to move permanently or temporarily, and there can be an irregular situation because that they have. For instance, they enter the country irregularly or that they have overstayed their visa. So, statistics shows that more than 40% of all international migrants globally were born in Asia, which amounts to approximately 112 million individuals who have their homes originally in Asian countries and who have migrated to Europe, to America or other parts of the world, either for education, employment or other political factors. Next, we have what is an exile. Exile is a situation in which you are forced to leave your country or home and go to live in a foreign country. Edward Said, who is a very important post-colonial critic, presents displacement through effective natural imagery when he explains that, I quote, exile in the words of Wallace Stevens is a mind of winter in which the pathos of summer and autumn as much as the potential of spring are nearby but unobtainable. So, it is a state of suspension, it is a state where nothing really is happening, right? It's almost like a state of limbo that exile, experiences. So, according to Edward Said, exile is similar to the Arabic word manfa, which denotes banishment. When someone is banished, someone becomes an outcast from the regular, the standard existence. Being an exile himself, Said, however, has always been unwilling to accept the feeling of loss or the feeling of, a negative feeling being the ultimate reality of being separated from one's homeland. That is definitely a very predominant feeling, but that cannot be the ultimate reality of exile existence. The critic observes that the exile as a social category is designed to diminish the dignity of an individual. So, something that is obtained through a secure identity by being a part of a specific group, culture, and locale, right? So, the critic observes that the exile as a social category is designed to diminish the dignity of an individual, something that a dignity that someone rightfully possesses, you know, through a secure identity by being a part of a specific group, culture, and locale. If I live in a geographical area or a geopolitical area with people that belong to similar ethnicity, similar linguistic group, similar religious group, then I will not be an exile. I will, by default have some basic human rights that are stripped from an exile. An exile is constantly under some kind of policing because they are seen as an unfamiliar figure. They are away from their homeland. They are not part of the secure territory. They are not part of their own specific cultural group or locale where they are supposed to belong by virtue of their birth, by virtue of their own body substance. So, I am away from the rest of the people who are like me. That is the situation of an exile. I am away from my own collective group. I am in an unfamiliar terrain, and so I need to be policed. I need to constantly, so because I'm not among the collectives that are like me in terms of language, in terms of religion and other habits and practices, because I am in an unfamiliar terrain, I have to constantly justify myself. That is the condition of an exile. Someone who constantly undergoes, a surveillance, a policing. According to Said, I quote, borders and barriers which enclose us within the safety of familiar territory can also become prison and are often defended beyond reason or necessity. So, such exiles are actually subjected to certain borders, barriers, boundaries such as the refugee camps, where there is a kind of surveillance, there is a kind of defense protection which sometimes becomes more than necessary or even unreasonable. According to Said, the writings, films, and photographs created out of the unhoused exilic experiences act as a revitalizing force for Western modernism. And more importantly, he believes that the pressing duty for today's intellectual is twofold. One is that it is imperative to connect the histories of dislocations with the socio-political interdependence of human beings across the globe. So, this interdependence of human beings across the globe needs to be established so that no exile is treated as someone who cannot have help, who cannot be extended, who cannot be extended some sort of basic necessity, who cannot be a claimant of the basic necessity, basic facilities that a human being needs, who cannot be claimant of the basic human dignity. So, the world is interconnected, human experiences are similar if not the same, and so there is the socio-political interdependence of human beings. The refugees can also, flourish the labor market in the host country, in the host state. So, refugees do not, it is not important to see refugees only as a burden to the state, we can also see them as a population that is benefiting the host state in many ways. So, how the globe is interconnected, that is one perspective that needs to be brought about. Second is as a way of preventing the monopolization of cultural histories, more complex and thereby intersecting points and nodes of interface among the different cultures need to be highlighted and need to be brought forward. So, one geographical region is not only about one cultural history. At different points in time, different cultures have lived there and left their own impact there. So, we can look at a terrain or a piece of land in terms of plural cultural histories that interplay to shape its meanings, right? So plural cultural histories that interplay to shape the meaning of a certain geopolitical state. That would be very interesting to look at the intersectional points and the nodes of interface that would prevent monopolization of any particular culture over the other. Now, going back to the types of migration, considering the place of origin and destination of migrants, we have already talked about internal migration. Just hearkening back, people moving about inside the borders of a nation or a state. This is internal migration. A shift of residence within a state, region, city or municipality is referred to as internal migration. Now, internal migration can basically be classified into 4 types: rural to urban migration, rural to rural migration, urban to urban migration, and finally urban to rural migration. Next, we have international migration. About this also we have discussed briefly. It indicates that people are relocating across international borders. An international migrant is a person who relocates to a different nation. Some people move in search of better work or economic opportunity. Some people choose to migrate to join their own family or to join educational institutions of international repute. Then in contemporary scenario, a large number of people move from their homeland to the host country in order to escape any kind of conflict, persecution or large scale human rights violations. Next, there is also a large number of populace who move in response to the adverse effects of climate change, natural disasters or other environmental factors. So, if we look at this chart, the causes of migration, we have the push factor, the pull factor, the natural factor, the economic factor, socio-cultural factor, political factor and demographic factor. So, according to the Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, as of 1st of July 2020, the global number of international migrants was estimated as 281 million. International migrants comprise some 3.5% of the global population compared to the 2.8% in 2000 and 2.3% in 1980. So, this international migrant, it is upscaling and it is growing exponentially with almost every year, with every decade we see this percentage has gone up by a few numbers. So, coming to the impacts of migration, research insights based on qualitative fieldwork and quantitative surveys emphasize that the impacts of migration primarily depend on the more general development context in the origin societies. What is happening back in the origin society actually impels, actually shapes the decision for a migrant to migrate, for an individual to migrate. So, what is happening? The context in the origin society actually shapes an individual's decision to migrate to another country or to another region. So, we need to study the determinants, the causes that lead to migration. Most studies support the view that migration within and from developing countries is a part of deliberate attempts by families to improve their social and economic status rather than a desperate flight from poverty or misery as it is often portrayed. So, more often it is not a very urgent or an emergent factor or reason why people migrate. It is more propelled by or driven by the dream of a better standard of living. Then we have a term called remittance. Remittance is a non-commercial transfer of money by a foreign worker, a member of a diaspora community or a citizen with familial ties abroad for the household income in their home country or homeland. A migrant worker could send some remittance money back to their home country, which actually helps the members in the native country to run their daily expenses. That is basically a source of income for the family that is staying back in the native country. The money sent by the migrant worker to the native country, that is known as the remittance. Remittances enable a relatively stable source of income, which often help to stabilize and raise household income overall, to improve living conditions, nutrition, health and education, as well as to finance certain cultural occasions such as weddings, funerals and such similar ceremonies. So, basically one member of family working abroad sending money back home, with which the household expenses are covered, as well as the family cultural functions are financed. So, at the national level, remittances provide a less volatile and a more reliable source of foreign currency as compared to other capital flows to the developing countries. Migrants and their families have good reasons to expect considerable financial gains from migrating across borders, particularly for those moving from low to high income countries. For example, migrant workers in the US earn on average about 4 times as much as they would back in their country of origin, which are usually the developing countries. If a person has moved from a developing country and settled in US, then chances are that their income increases manifold, almost 4 times. On the other hand, we see that the Pacific Islanders in New Zealand increase their net real wages by a factor of 3 by migrating. So, migration we see is driven by the economic factor mostly and the lifestyle factor, how the overall lifestyle is enhanced and facilitated as a way of moving from one of the developing countries to Europe or to the US. The effects and impacts of migration on inequality in origin communities thus primarily depend on who migrates. So, this is known as the selectivity of migration. For instance, if migrants are from relatively wealthy families, if a wealthy member from a developing country migrates, right, then migration and remittances tend to reinforce socio-economic inequality in the origin communities. On the other hand, if migrants are from less wealthy sections of the population and the relatively poor are increasingly able to migrate through the establishment of migrant networks. So, if the poorer section from the developing country on the other hand are able to migrate, find a job and establish themselves through migrant networks, then the effects can be neutral or even become positive over a period of time for the developing country from where they have originally come, right. So, if put it very plain, if a wealthy person from a developing country moves to Europe or to the US, it is not really very beneficial in socioeconomic terms for the origin country. On the other hand, if a poorer section, if the wage workers are able to find the migrant networks and go as laborer, work as laborer in another country, they move from the developing country to another country and find a job, that leaves a positive impact on their country of origin, the developing country, over a period of time. So, migration selectivity is a term which is which denotes the tendency for certain groups or individuals to migrate based on specific characteristics such as their age, skills, education as well as their socioeconomic status. Migration selectivity is a process which results in migrants being known through their distinct attributes and not as a representative of the overall population. I would like to continue with this topic in our next lecture. Thank you.